welcome to episode 174 of the Fertility Podcast from my garden, where there's quite a lot of lovely birdsong that I think will make a nice background for you. There's a bit too much activity going on in my house. There's some DIY, there's some quite loud film watching, so I couldn't go to my normal booth, my voiceover booth, to record this intro and the outro for this podcast, so I've come to the garden. And I don't know what bird that is. Blue tit, maybe? My bird knowledge is pretty rubbish. Something I'll talk about later actually in this episode. So if this is your first listen to the podcast, welcome. This is the last episode of my alternative parenting season for now, where I've tried to speak to people at different stages of their parenting journey that have gone through a whole range of different routes. I've had experts talk about legalities involved, counsellors, just trying to give you a really varied overview of the many routes that we take to parenthood. If you've been listening for a while, I hope this has been useful. But if this has been your first listen and maybe you're just starting to ask more questions, do have a look through my previous episodes, either via thefertilitypodcast.com or your favourite podcast app. And whilst you're doing that, you can always rate and review this podcast. I'd love you for doing that. Be sure to follow me on my socials too, at FertilityPoddy on Twitter and Instagram. It's always good to keep in touch and to hear from you. So I hope you've had a good week. I have got some exciting news in that I am in the latest Grazia in the UK, talking about infertility in the workplace, which is something that I've talked about on this podcast before, but I had to work my way through whilst doing a live breakfast show, having my IVF treatment whilst I was on air, not literally obviously, but having to work my way around all the appointments and the scans, which was a challenge. And it's something that I wanted to make people aware of what we have to go through, and it's something that I'll be talking about more on this podcast. A number of you have been contacting me on my socials, telling me about your experiences, and please continue to. You can drop me an email, Natalie at thefertilitypodcast.com, or those social channels at FertilityPoddy on Twitter or Insta are a good way of getting in touch. I'm going to be talking about this at the Fertility Show in Manchester happening this weekend. Again, all the details of that will be on the show notes for this episode, along with details of the event I'm hosting that evening with a group of fab ladies called Talk Fertility. So have a look. So we're going to be hearing from two ladies in this episode. Becky, who's on Instagram as @definingmum. Becky had her family using donor eggs, and I wanted to talk to her about that point where she had to accept that was going to be the route she took and how that felt. We're also going to speak to Mel Johnson about her decision to be a solo mum, how it's been for her over the last year. I spoke to Mel previously about the decision to go down the solo motherhood route. I'll share that episode, but this is about the realities of what it's like, because I wanted to give you that point of view as well. So two ladies coming up, but before we start the show, I want to tell you a little bit about my sponsors who make what I do possible. They support the podcast, and I always try to find people who I think are relevant to you along your journey with helpful products and services available for you. So first up is a new sponsor called Assured Fertility, and here's Holly to tell you more about them.
Hi, my name's Holly and I'm the Patient and Clinic Liaison Manager here at Assured Fertility. We've spent the last 3 years working with academics and top fertility clinics in the UK and abroad, with our focus to simplify the IVF process for you and provide support and guidance throughout your journey. We provide a range of 100% refund IVF plans, so if you don't have a baby through the Assured plan, we will refund everything you've paid. This, of course, is subject to the terms of your agreement with us. So let me explain a little bit about how our packages work. We have 3 plans available: our IVF plan, our combined plan, and our egg donor plan. Absolutely all of our plans include all consultations, screening, medication, everything you need for your treatment is included, and there's no hidden charges whatsoever. We want you to have as smooth and stress-free experience as possible. We work with a number of clinics throughout the UK and abroad, and we are able to offer payment plans to you which is subject to acceptance. So we're going to be at the Fertility Show in Manchester on the 23rd and 24th 24th of March, so it'd be great for you to come down and meet with us. And the exciting news is that we'll also be launching our new plan, which we'll be more than happy to tell you about. To find out more about us, visit assuredfertility.co.uk.
The Fertility Podcast is also sponsored by Apricity, a virtual clinic of a new kind. Apricity offers first-class fertility care, as unique as you. Get support from your Apricity advisor 7 days a week. Stay in the know with the app's guidance and reminders. Customise your journey at no extra cost. Apricity is fertility care your way. Find out more at apricity.life/podcast. This podcast is sponsored by International Andrology, who specialise in diagnosing and treating male infertility. Around 50% of infertility issues are male factor, and all too often, men aren't even evaluated at the start of a fertility journey, which might result in unnecessary treatments, costs, and disappointment. International Andrology is one of the few specialist clinics in the UK offering a holistic approach to increase your chances to conceive naturally or via the IVF route. As well as treating the underlying causes of male infertility, their doctors have some of the highest success rates in microsurgical sperm retrieval. So, if you're looking for a true specialist to assist you on your fertility journey, visit london-andrology.co.uk today and do mention the Fertility Podcast. So I'm now going to check in with Becky, who is on Insta as Defining Mum, because I was really keen to capture some of Becky's story. She's got a really brilliantly concise and insightful blog, and I want to direct you there because I'm going to pick up kind of further down Becky's journey. But first of all, Becky, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Well, I confess, this is our second time. This is our second time because I didn't hit save when I spoke to Becky the other day, and we had this lovely chat, so I'm being really apologetic and I'm sorry for being a time waster. I really am.
It's not a problem. I enjoyed chatting, so that's no problem at all.
Becky has been sharing her journey on her Insta and getting like an amazing response after she's been really openly talking about the decision to use a donor to have her family. And I wanted to kind of get Becky's feelings about having to get your head around that, because you can read how she's documented what happened before. And when we spoke last time, Becky, I was quite amazed at how you've been documenting for not very long, only since we're talking March 2019. You only started really at the end of last year, and you're just doing it from memory, aren't you?
Yes, yeah. So I didn't actually write much down when we were going through it all, but I'd always wanted to share the story, and so I kind of managed to get down the key things that happened, and everything really came flooding back. So I started in November when it was Fertility Week. I thought that was a good week to launch, and haven't looked back really. It's taken off way more than I thought it would, and it's just been so rewarding just to see how many people have contacted me to say it's really helped them.
Well, it shows how many people sadly are possibly in the same boat. Becky was diagnosed with premature ovarian failure. Anything with the word failure in it is just an awful diagnosis.
Horrible, isn't it? Yes, it is, yeah. When you're diagnosed with infertility, the last word you want to hear is failure, because that's something that I think we all feel a bit. Our bodies have failed us. So when it's included in the diagnosis, it really doesn't help with the emotional side of dealing with things.
Because with that, were you pretty much told that your only option was fertility treatment and get on with it as soon as possible? Or was there any other, you could try this holistic method, you could try look at this for a bit, change this in your lifestyle, or was it, no, you've got to have treatment?
No, it was pretty much you've got to have treatment. So when I finally had the diagnosis, I pretty much self-diagnosed myself actually after having hormones tested and GPs getting things wrong. But by the time I saw a consultant, his response was, you need to start IVF right away now if you want to try and use your own eggs. I was always told that I'd have age on my side because I was only 28 at the time. And so we were literally thrown within a period of 6 weeks from diagnosis into our first IVF cycle. And we went through 5 cycles before we moved to donor eggs. First cycle was actually successful, so I became pregnant, but sadly lost that at 8 weeks. I had a miscarriage. So I think in a way at first I thought it was easier than I thought because I'd got pregnant and that was it, and I just assumed that would happen again. So in a way I think that probably delayed my decision to use a donor, because I kept thinking, well, it's happened once, surely it can happen again. So a lot of things mess with your mind, and I think I've been asked quite a few times by people, how do you know when it's the right time? And it's such an individual decision. And I would never say that I had a light bulb moment where I suddenly thought, right, this is it, we've got to move. But you get to a point where you weigh things up and you start to think about what you really want, and you start to think about the impact that the journey is having on you. And for us, after those 5 cycles, both emotionally and financially, we were struggling, and we'd spent a hell of a lot of money throwing it at my eggs. I was losing faith in my own body, and we kept being told that we would have probably a 50% chance if we used donor eggs. And then it was at that point I started to think about, okay, what do I really want? And what I really wanted was to be a mum. And then I started to sort of process in my mind, okay, what would that mean, being a mum through using donor eggs? And it would mean I can still carry. It would mean I can still influence that child whilst I'm growing the child. And it means I can be with them from the very second that they were born, and they would be 100% mine. And I wanted to be a mum, and I wanted all those day-to-day things. And that's when I really started to suddenly change my feelings and start to feel a bit more excited about the idea. And that was probably about 12 to 18 months after I was first diagnosed.
And what about your other half? Was it as straightforward with him deciding that this was going to be the way you were going?
Not really, no. So at first, Matt was pretty against the idea. He didn't seem to warm to the idea when we were first told that donor would be our best option. And we were told right from the beginning that donor would be the better option, but we decided to give our eggs a go. And I remember having a really, really difficult conversation, and it's a tough thing that can happen in a relationship when one of you is infertile and the other one is fertile, and you suddenly feel that you're letting the other person down. I remember saying to him, what if I need to use donor eggs? And he wasn't keen on the idea at the time. And I suddenly started to consider, oh my God, if he doesn't want to do this, and that's my only option to have a child, what does this mean? And it was a pretty big question. But I mean, after we went through the cycles, he started to come round to the idea as well. And actually, when we first embarked upon getting a consultation for using donor eggs, I had a bit of a wobble myself, and we kind of switched roles. And Matt then became the one who supported me through that. And now today, I mean, he's delighted we took that decision. And he always says we've got a much more interesting story than your average conception. And yeah, I think we both needed to sort of almost go through that process in our own way, but with each other. And yeah, eventually, obviously, it's led to 3 beautiful girls, and we wouldn't change it now.
I mean, it's such an unknown. And you talked about now having 3 children. We can hear, I think, 1, maybe 2 of them in the background.
Yes.
One's napping. Is that right? We've got 1 napping, 2 awake still.
So yeah, I've just put one of the twins down. So my twins are 1-year-old, Eska and Lena. So Eska's just gone down for a nap, and I'm hoping she'll go. Lena is still awake with my mum in the next room, who hopefully will be going down for a nap again soon. And my 2.5-year-old is up, supposed to be napping, but as I came to speak to you, she was still sat up in bed. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to go. But yeah, 3 under 3.
We're being thrifty.
Yeah, we are. But I thought we'd try and get this in.
Exactly. Because some of the points that Becky has already raised, I think, are really important about the kind of the pressure that this decision puts on you. It's a complete unknown. To have to get your head around the fact that you're not going to be able to use your own eggs is one thing. To then have that conversation with your other half and all that you've just described. Because I know when we spoke last time, I said about a friend of mine who, when they'd had failed treatment 3 rounds and they were talking about donor eggs, something that I'd brought up from the kind of knowledge I had, she said that her husband was adamant that wasn't the route that they were going, and fortunately she had success with her own eggs. But that's such a hard conversation to try and work out the what ifs, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I honestly, at the time, I didn't know how I would feel if he was to block that option for me. If that had been the only option, he wasn't wanting that option, that would have been a huge thing for me to process. But I mean, obviously, thankfully, we didn't get to that position. I think where we were, I mean, we'd never really known anyone who'd struggled with infertility before we did ourselves. And so there's one thing finding out about all of that world, but then there's the whole donor conception world. And one of the reasons I wanted to start the blog and share the story is because the whole concept, when I first heard about it, seemed totally alien to me. I didn't even realise that people actually donated eggs and people received them and then grew babies from them. And so it was just, I had to start from scratch. And one of the things I really struggled to find as I was trying to process things and work out whether this was an option for me was some really positive stories out there where I could really see the reality of life as a family after using donor eggs. And I'm a very visual person. I like to see things. I like to connect with people. And it was only through searching in forums, asking loads of questions a few years ago that I actually found someone who became very important to me in my journey, a lady who has a little boy through donor eggs, and she supported me through the whole thing really. Never once said to me, do it, use donor eggs. She just let me decide in my own time. But through seeing the relationship she had with her son, I became to realise that actually it really didn't matter. And if anything, they had a stronger bond than I'd seen between most families. And it just gave me that reassurance that life didn't have to be any different. Obviously, there are some challenges that will come across that other people necessarily won't have to, such as having those conversations about how the girls came to be, but we've decided we're going to be 100% open right from the outset, so that from the very beginning they know it's not a secret, it's not something we're ashamed of. We're actually incredibly proud of how we came to have them. And so, yeah, I think what I wanted to do was try and give people that positive reality that they could connect with, and hopefully then sort of see themselves in a few years' time being able to have that same happiness that we've got now.
And when you saw it first time with that lady and you saw the relationship, did it feel like a weight had lifted, that all of those worries, there was no substance to them because you could purely see that it was just this loving relationship? It didn't really matter the origins, it's just what you see in front of you.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of those sort of doubts I had in my mind about, I mean, I'm sure and most people that have contacted me have the similar sort of doubts that I once had around, so they won't necessarily look like me. Will people be looking at me and my child and thinking, she's obviously not their mum? And that has never once happened. And actually people always see what they want to see, but seeing my now she's a good friend of mine, with her little boy, there was no question that they were mother and son. You could just tell, and he looks like his dad, as do most children. The girls look so much like Matt. And most people, like I say, will see what they want to see. I've had several people say to me, I think Eska's much more like you. But that doesn't bother me as much as I thought it would. I think at the beginning it seemed to be a lot about looks and how that would factor in. But actually, I can see how the girls in personality, particularly Mina, my eldest, is more like me, and she spends much more time with me. So I'm now a stay-at-home mum, looking after the girls, and I can see how my personality and the way I speak and my sense of humour has all sort of rubbed off on Mina, and my sister-in-law often comments to say that, oh my God, that is just so you, what Mila has just said, that is just you. And it's really heartwarming to see when people do see that connection, and they can see how actually nurture over nature is something, it's real. And I think I've mentioned before epigenetics as part of my blog. I did a short post on it, but if anyone's looking into donor eggs, have a read of epigenetics, because it's fascinating to see how, if that same embryo that I had inside of me was put back inside the donor, that child wouldn't be the exact identical copy of Mila, for example. So the way in which I carried her and the expression of the genes throughout my womb actually had an impact on which genes were turned up, turned down, and how her genes were expressed. So I just find that fascinating, that actually that individual is created because of a very kind lady, an egg donor, my husband, and also me, and I gave that child life. And that's what I think I really started to realise, that actually I was still the one giving life right from that very beginning. From day 5 as an embryo, they were with me. And I found comfort in that as well.
The epigenetic side is fascinating, and I have got an upcoming episode with a brilliant functional medicine practitioner, Angela Heap, who knows loads about it. And it is mind-boggling to know what can turn on and turn off and how supplements can have an impact and all that kind of thing. That's another conversation, because one of the other things that's happened as a result of Becky hearing an episode that I shared at the start of this alternative parenting season with the brilliant Jana Rupno, who is a counsellor herself, working with couples and individuals going through donor conception, is Becky and Jana are now working together. So tell me a bit about that conversation and what you're hoping to do, because it's one of the reasons that I like to do what I do, is I love connecting the dots for people, and I love that you two are speaking.
Yeah, it was a few weeks ago I listened to the first episode of your alternative parenting series, and it was with Jana. And I found myself, I was in the car with the girls, and I found myself almost in tears as I listened to it, because the way in which she spoke, particularly about the grief that you go through when you're having to come to terms with not having your own genetic child, it resonated with me so much that I just found myself, I haven't listened to it twice actually, because I just had to hear her words again. And I realised that I'd been going around saying, and almost lightening what I'd been through by saying, look, what I felt was almost grief. It was almost like grief, when actually it was grief, and it was layers and layers of grief that had happened over a period of time, where not only had I had to accept that I wasn't going to have my own genetic child, I'd still had the disappointments every month, the loss from the miscarriage, and what it did was really validate how I'd been feeling. And so I posted about it because I thought it was a really interesting point to share. And on the back of that, Jana got in touch with me and we started talking. And one of the things I wanted to talk to her about was anonymity, and that's something that does still play on my mind after having the girls through a donor in Prague. And we got talking and we said, look, I think there's something we can do with this, because we've both got the same aims, and we're both really passionate. And I just really think that by having the combination of my own experience and sort of still processing feelings, but also having recently been through the grief, but then the happiness that follows, and with Jana's experience and the way in which she can almost validate how we've been feeling and talk about it in terms of not necessarily how you should feel, but that it's perfectly normal to feel in those ways. And having that together, we thought we could really help people. So we've got a series that starts the 19th, which is an Insta Live series. And we're going to be talking about the emotional decisions that are part of donor conception. So the first one we're talking about is grief, and actually making that decision to use a donor. And we've been asking people to send us questions, so we'll be focusing on those that have asked the questions, and hopefully try and make it as interactive as possible. The future series will be around parental attachment concerns, so will I bond with the child? And then the last one will be around sharing the story with the child, so whether or not you're going to tell. So yeah, hopefully it will be really, really useful for people, and who knows what the future holds later down the line. But the collaboration is really exciting, and something that I hadn't envisaged doing when I started the blog, but so many things have come out of it that hopefully will help many people.
We'll put all the details of A, the chat that I did with Jana, and B, what they're going to be doing, Becky and Jana, and how you can follow, because as Becky's saying, as well as being a full-time mum and managing what is a growing blog and Insta community, you've created these fertility support Saturdays, which I just want to mention before I let you go, because I noticed them popping up, and how you've got different people on Instagram involved. And if you're listening to this and you're not on Instagram for whatever reason, it's fine. But if you are and you haven't yet, it's fine. Get me. It's fine. You're not on Instagram. If it's not your social media platform of choice, because there are many. Well, this is the thing, because I was speaking to someone the other day who didn't even realise about the community, the Trying to Conceive community on Instagram, and it's immensely powerful in what's kind of evolved. And Fertility Support Saturday is an example. So do you want to just explain what you've created and what you're doing with that?
It started, this was just before Christmas, and one of the things I was trying to think about was how we can better share our stories, and how I could almost get my story out there as well more to help and those people that needed to hear. And I sent a message to a few of the ladies on Instagram that are quite active, so Alice Rose, Kat, as trying years, and a few other really inspirational ladies, and just said, look, is there a way in which we can share our stories to try and reach as many people as possible as a way of helping them? And we started off by just sharing each other, and then we decided that we could do a bit more, and we did an Ask Us Anything week. So we all have in our highlights reel the videos from that still. So if anyone wants to go and check out some of the questions that we were asked, mine are mainly around donor conception. We've saved all of those. And then the next stage of evolution was almost to look down the line of the power of sharing and involving everybody else within the community. So what I wanted was to give a platform for people to be able to share their story. And it's a short bio and a picture, which can be anonymous if they prefer. And it just gives the chance for people to connect with others who might be going through similar things that they're going through, because infertility is vast. There's so many different diagnoses, so many different treatments, that actually you might want to find someone who's been through something similar to you, or might have a similar experience that you could support, or you could gain some insight into. So every Saturday I share 10 profiles through my stories, and then they're also saved on my highlights reel. So if anyone wants to go and have a browse through and connect with some people, they can do that. And I've still got people coming through now, so I think we're about 5 weeks into it now. So hoping soon we'll hit the 100 mark, and it'll just keep running. And people have been really excited. I've had some fantastic feedback, and I'm hoping that it will continue and it will evolve further.
It's brilliant, and it's really lovely to see, and it's amazing what's kind of created. I mean, don't know how much time it takes for you to be spending on Insta, but it's definitely worthwhile, and it's amazing what you've managed to create.
Thank you. I've got a process now, so I'm getting it's not taking me as long each week to pull them together.
Got a system.
But yes, I've got a system in place now. The first week took quite a while, but yeah, if anybody does want to be involved, then they can contact me. I think you're going to put my details at the end of the show notes. So yeah, then just send me a message, because I'm open to receiving any stories, and in particular if we've got anyone from a background that's not so widely shared. So we're looking for a bit more diversity, to sort of show people that they're not alone. So I've had some ladies come forward recently who I'm going to be sharing, and some people who are very bravely taking those first steps to share, and have felt really empowered by doing so. So it's great to be able to give people that platform to do so.
If someone wants to share, and you've just talked about getting more diversity, and maybe they're in a community where infertility really isn't spoken about, obviously we're talking about a visual platform, but is it fair to say that you could send a picture of something and you could write about yourself without actually saying your name?
Absolutely, yeah. So that's why I love Instagram so much, because people can be as involved or as visible as they like. But yeah, I've got actually one I'm sharing this week, a lady from the Asian community who didn't want to share a photo of herself, but she shared a lovely picture of some flowers, and that is fine, because actually the important bit is what's in the bio that people will connect to, and I'm hoping that she will be inspiring others from that background to also come forward and talk and feel that like they're not alone, and that there are others that are experiencing the same things. So it's just being able to facilitate that connection, really, that is what it's all about.
Because that is the beauty of Instagram to a point.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's why I love Instagram so much, because people can be as involved or as visible as they like. But yeah, I've got actually one I'm sharing this week, a lady from the Asian community who didn't want to share a photo of herself, but she shared a lovely picture of some flowers, and that is fine, because actually the important bit is what's in the bio that people will connect to, and I'm hoping that she will be inspiring others from that background to also come forward and talk and feel that like they're not alone, and that there are others that are experiencing the same things. So it's just being able to facilitate that connection, really, that is what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, like Becky said, we'll put all the details in the show notes. Do go and check them out and get in touch. Thank you, Becky, for sharing. And do go and check out Becky's blog to read what happened kind of up until that point that we picked up on, which was quite far into Becky's journey. I'm going to let you go and see your little ladies.
Thank you.
Look forward to seeing the series with Jana, and good luck with it.
Fantastic. Yes, thanks very much, Natalie.
All of Becky's details will be on the show notes. And now it's time to catch up with Mel.
My name's Mel. I am 40 years old. I have an 11-month-old, Daisy. She's just about to turn 1. And I had her using IVF with a donor sperm, which makes me a solo mum.
Now, Mel and I have spoken before, and I will share the story of Mel's decision process and how it was choosing the donor and all that in the show notes, because one of the reasons I wanted to include Mel in this alternative parenting series was talking about the realities of being a solo mum now that she's nearly a year into it, and all the things that she's learned and had to consider, because I think it's a really good thing if you are looking to go down this route to know the realities of what life is actually going to be from somebody who's living it. And Mel's now doing a lot of work to help other women. So let's start at that point of, I've put it as redefining yourself, because you've become a mum and now you have got to navigate your way through, and it is just you. So tell me some of the kind of initial things that you found really tricky to just manage.
Yeah, and I think this conversation is so important, because I think we do tend to see the glossy version, and I think it is really good to also discuss the reality of it, so people know what they're letting themselves in for. So I think it has been definitely a journey and a roller coaster. some of the things that I have found difficult, it is the loneliness is definitely one thing. So I would probably say lack of adult company. When I was on maternity leave, having Daisy for the full day, doing childcare all day, and learning to be a mum, it was new in the beginning, and then going into the evening routine, bath, bed, and I make that sound very straightforward, as we all know sometimes that can take a considerable amount of time and effort. And it was that period, and I'm sure all mums have this, but it's that period where you've done the whole day, you've bathed them, you've got them to sleep, and you're like, yes. And then you come back downstairs, the bathroom's trashed, so you need to go and tidy that up. The kitchen's trashed from making dinner, you've got to go and sort that out. There's toys everywhere, you've got to go and tidy them up. And then finally you can sort of get on to you and make sure that you're eating and have your life. And then there's silence in the house. There's no other adults there. There's no adult company. There's no one to chat to about your day or how it's been. There's no one to help you tidy up. And if that goes on night after night after night, it can become very lonely. And that's not to mention that you then haven't got a social life. So, you might want to actually go out and socialise. So for a period of time, and it happened to me as I was going back to work actually, I found that after I'd done a day at work and then done the evening routine, those evenings I did start to feel lonely, and I worked out some things to put in place to try to stop that from happening, and it is a world of difference now.
So what are some examples of what you did?
So the main thing is organisation. So I now book my diary so far in advance. So have things planned. If you leave it to chance, it won't happen.
Like social things with your friends?
Anything. So social things, work things, anything that I want to do, book it in advance and figure out where it best fits in. But one of the massive things I've had to do, and this is just a mindset change, I have to ask people, I have to organise things. So I realised that I was deselecting myself from things because I thought I'd be putting people out, or people wouldn't want me to tag along as I was thinking it, because, I'm on my own. And actually, it couldn't be further from the truth. And what I've realised is lots of people love me joining, or me and Daisy joining. And so now, looking at the diary in advance and saying, what things can Daisy and I do with other people, and what opportunities have I got to do stuff and to socialise. I'm in a very lucky situation where my mum looks after Daisy every Friday. And so every Thursday night, my mum stays at mine. Thursday night is my sacred, what am I going to do with my Thursday night? So absolutely, last night was Thursday and I went out for dinner, and it's making the most of that precious time, being organised. How would you want to fill any spare minute that you've sort of got for yourself?
I mean, there's definitely an element, I feel, in the way that I conduct my social life with my son, in that I have a partner, but he works the hours that he works, and then will come home and want to sleep, for example, and I want to do so. So I think there's definitely that element of, as a parent, having that in place. But like you've brilliantly kind of just highlighted, you're responsible for it entirely on your own, aren't you? And I mean, I think a lot of women will be the organisers anyway,
yes.
Whether you're in a relationship or not. So it's just making sure, like you say, that you carry things on going, because you do lose you do lose your identity, and you do lose, I don't know, like you can't remember when you used to the last time you went out dancing, and all these kind of things that you have to kind of make a point of.
I really feel like I reached a turning point where I just felt more like myself, and I really embraced that. So I like to call 2018 the year of the tracksuit. So for me, I was just grabbing whatever was comfortable and did not focus at all on my appearance, and it started to actually have a negative impact on me. And at a period of time I thought, I actually need to do something about this. So now I get up, put some makeup on, do my hair, and choose something nice to wear. And it can sound like a small thing, but for my mental health, that makes a massive difference. And again, relevant for all mums, I think that's no difference of being a solo mum.
But that mental health element to it, you don't realise how much, not saying that you should always take pride in your appearance, but simple things like that can make such a difference. And when you work for yourself, and if you're working from home, you can fall into that pattern as well.
That was definitely part of the problem. I work from home, so the vast majority of the time my office is my dining room, and now it doesn't matter, I'm still up in my work clothes because that puts my head in a different space, and it makes me tackle the day in a different way.
Whilst we're talking about work and kind of organising, let's talk about kind of productivity, because I know it doesn't just apply to your social life, does it?
No, definitely not. So productivity is my sort of number one specialist subject. I love trying to be more productive. So what I do is, it's very much about what works well at what time. So I have a period of time when Daisy's at nursery, I have a period of time when we're together, and I have a period of time on my own when she's asleep. And I really plan, what should I be doing with all of those different times? What can I multitask? What can I ask someone else to do? So I don't do it by chance. I've really planned it, and it just has started falling into place so well with me. And as Daisy gets a bit older, what I found is I can involve her in more things. What's really made a difference now is that we tidy up together as we go. So when I come down, I haven't got the whole house to do, and she enjoys it. She loves loading the dishwasher. She's not much of a help, but you can make a game out of some of these things, and she really enjoys that. So I've kind of started following my day around as I go, and making sure that I haven't got a big thing to do afterwards. But it's also about where you've got your energy. So I know I'm super productive in the morning and much less so at night. So if I've got something I really need to get done, I need to do it in the morning. But also, again, going back to asking for help, there's some stuff I don't need to do. I have, my mum is a huge support, and sometimes I have to say, could you help me with this? At first, I definitely was being a hero. And there's a model I like to use called the victim triangle. And if you try to be a hero, quite often when you don't succeed with that, you can go a bit into victim. And I was a bit, you can start feeling sorry for yourself. And where you need to get it to is more of a, thinking logically, what do I need to do here, and how can I ask for the help that I need? So that's hard for me. I think a lot of people find it hard. And particularly when you're a solo mum, you have signed up for this on your own. Asking people for help, you sometimes feel, well, I went into this knowing I was going to do it on my own, so now why am I entitled to ask for help? No matter how you go into motherhood, I think everyone can ask for help if they need it, and I really would encourage that.
Whether you're a parent or not, you can ask for help.
Exactly.
So why wouldn't you?
Exactly.
That's what your friends are for, that's what your family are for. You just kind of put yourself in this, like you say, the victim, whatever model you do, the hero model or whatever. Yeah. You make this kind of fulfilling prophecy almost, that you have to achieve all this stuff, and it doesn't necessarily pan out as you'd hoped, and then you drive yourself mad as a result.
Exactly.
Now, you talked about the point of going back to work being quite a significant one. How was that transition, and going back to work and then telling everybody in your day-to-day life, your now new identity as a parent? So the anxiety about going back to work was so much greater than the reality. So I think that's the first thing. I was much more anxious than really needed to be. It was actually really a smooth transition for me. I'm very lucky. My company is super supportive. So we had conversations prior to me going back about what I needed. I think that's advice I would give to people. Really say from a starting point of what you need, and they can only say no, but at least ask for, reach for the stars, and then let's see what you get from there. So my company were really supportive, and I can work quite flexibly, which is great. Again, back to my mental health, it's been really good for me to have, to use my brain in a different way. And now my interactions with Daisy are just so meaningful and valuable. And then I have some time to do the work thing and use my brain. That's been great. I've transitioned back more quickly than I thought I would. I'm very lucky I only work 4 days a week, so I have that 5th day as time
time to play, if you like. So yeah, it's not been as hard as I thought, but a lot of it is down to my company being supportive, and I think I had a role in that in terms of defining what I needed to be successful.
What about the conversations that you have about being a solo mum? How are they working out? And are there stumbling blocks that you found? Are there now little sound bites that you have in place?
That is exactly what I do. So I've got it just down to a fine art about, I do find, maybe not on a daily basis, but on a very regular basis, I do have to tell people, because everyone presumes you've got a partner, and there's so many examples where people refer to your partner. So just thinking about some recent examples, someone came to fit my boiler and he was saying, you know, if you want to tell your partner X, Y or Z, and I was like, A, if I had a partner, no. Why would I want to tell him?
I can hold on to this information.
Exactly. But I said, oh no, I haven't got a partner. And people look shocked because they've seen my daughter there, and you know, they can see she's quite young. And I said, no, I've chosen to have her on my own. So for someone like a builder, I would just say, you know, no, I've chosen to have her on my own. For somebody who I want to give a bit more of an explanation to, I would say, oh, I chose to have her on my own because, you know, I'm 40 and I thought if I don't do something on my own, I might lose out on the opportunity of motherhood. And honestly, that sort of one sentence is enough. Then some people are really interested and they say, do you mind if we ask you a bit more about it? And I absolutely don't. And some people just, that's enough for them and they leave it at that. So I always advise people to just get, you know, exactly what you said, a soundbite that they're comfortable with. I tend to really say it up front because I think it makes situations easier than then later down the line having to try to explain to people. And I've had an absolutely positive response to it. But it is interesting how many people come from the presumption that you have a partner. Nursery, everyone I interact with, they refer to the partner.
Well, also in even just talking about that you have decided to have that line ready, or we've just talked about having that line ready because of how society does perceive women on their own with children. They'd assume that you did have a partner rather than what you've just now explained, which is almost, it's more empowering than, I suppose, to say as you do, no, I've made this decision.
Yeah, and that is why I do that, because I don't want anyone to think that I am stuck in this circumstance, if you like. Rightly or wrong, I mean, it doesn't matter, but that's just my preference, that people know I went into it choosing that.
Yeah, that it was the choice.
Yeah.
So, as far as the kind of day-to-day, we've talked about how you've redefined your time and you've asked for help and how you're kind of talking about it to others. This presumption of there being a partner is part of it. Do you feel then that there are more far-reaching circumstances about telling your story, like your extended family or people that you're interacting in a more important way than your builder or the nursery? Are there different tools then as far as how you tell your story?
Yeah, so for me, obviously I work with women who are also going through the journey of solo motherhood. So one of the things that I spend a lot of time doing is helping other people in this same situation, you know, frame how best to tell their story. I think in our last conversation I said I'm a bit of an oversharer, so I found it very easy to tell everybody that I interacted with, and I was very open and actually told a lot of my story because it's something I'm very proud of. I help people to reframe that, to try to come to that same place, because some people start off feeling anxious about it, and actually if you do feel proud about it, it's much easier to tell your story. You're actually excited to tell it. So I've told anybody really, and everybody who I interacted with, was very honest and was guided by them a little bit about how interested they were in it and how much they wanted to know. For me, it's about how you feel about it, and because I feel hugely proud and positive, it's not a problem at all for me to share.
Now, you just used the word guide, and I think this is something that you and I have spoken about, not off the record, so to speak. And it's something actually I was talking about with people recently, about this idea that I call them of guide parents, which is a kind of idea that friends in Brighton shared with me when they weren't having godparents, they were having guide parents for their children, and they were asking their friends at like a ceremony to come forward with skills that they'd share. And I know we spoke about it, and there was I think something that I'd seen that you shared on social media about a friend who you were getting, like a male friend that you were getting on board. Was it to teach Daisy to ride a bike? Or so just talk a bit about that mindset of looking at maybe the skills that you haven't got or you don't enjoy, and if you've got friends, male or female, that could fill those gaps, that you can kind of extend the parenting.
Yeah, so somebody once asked me the question, have you got someone that you're sort of substituting that partner role with? And what I said is, no, there's absolutely not one person, there's many people, and I'm really lucky that I've got some awesome people in my life. And as much as I like to think that I've got the right answer for everything, I'm really aware that I've got one view and there's lots of different views, and I want to make sure that Daisy's exposed to lots of different views. For me, it's split into two. It's about views and just being, influenced by people, and then there's practical things as well. So the example I gave was swimming. I'm not great at swimming, I don't particularly enjoy swimming, and I don't want that to rub off onto Daisy. And so I asked one of my male friends who loves swimming, I'd love it if you could, take Daisy swimming. I think it would be bonding for you and she'd really benefit from it. And I was surprised by how keen he was. And it made me realise, I've asked friends, male and female, could you guide her on X, Y or Z? One of my friends goes climbing and he said he'd take her when she's old enough, and, lots of different things. And Daisy will benefit from all of those different influences. And I was speaking to one of the girls I was coaching on the same situation, and, we were saying, actually, everyone could benefit from this, but because we are anxious that there's maybe a role model missing, we've spent the time thinking about it. So actually our children will probably really benefit from this because they have loads more influences in their lives, and people love being asked. That's what I found. So it gives them a real sense of pride that you that you want to ask them to be that role model in that area.
I think it's a lovely thing for you with your friends as well, whether you're a solo parent or like you just said, because we've got some friends, and when our little boy turned 1, they sent him a membership for the RNIB, and every time they see him they give him a bird related book. Aww. And they're really into birds, and they've kind of taken it upon themselves to be his bird guide, as we're now calling them. But in the same vein, I've got other friends that are quite good with their gardening knowledge, little bits and bobs that you'd quite like your child to have. I think we can all do it, and I think it's a shared, I think, especially from my point of view as well, being, and it's probably something that again is relevant with you, in that if you are probably only going to have one child, then again you're really aware to give them as much grounding and as an information for them to decide what it is and isn't that they're into, if they're not going to have a sibling. Maybe that's guilt, but maybe it's just thinking more about it because you have the time to think about the rounded picture for that child's upbringing.
Exactly. And I think again, when I've got one child, I also don't want them to just be massively influenced by me. I want them to have a variety of influences, so they have a wider view of the world as they're growing up. So I think it's a really nice thing to do for everyone involved, really.
Now the reality of the situation is you are on your own in this situation, and I know that it's something that you've had to think about seriously and sensibly, and you've had to think about the what if scenario. So just talk to me about that and how that's felt and what it is that you're kind of looking at.
I would say it's probably one of the biggest anxieties I've got, and I guess it's an ego thing, because you think, if I'm not here, life won't be as good. So what I really spent a lot of time considering what would happen if I wasn't here. I haven't formalised it. I am going through that process at the moment of putting a will in place and putting all of the, the formal requests. And I have asked a friend who, again, was just so honoured and flattered that I would think of her. I thought about who would bring my daughter up in the most similar way to me, who has the most similar values, and who, from their point of view, also could do it in their life, you know, someone who hasn't already got 3 children or whatever, you know, so someone who I thought would be able to take that role on if they needed to. Had the conversation with her, and it's really nice now looking at her relationship with Daisy, because I think, you know, it really improves the bond. I know it's something that people don't want to think about, and it's easy to sort of put it to something you need to do later, but for me it was just really important that had been considered, so that I know things are in place if the worst case scenario happens.
How would you say that this experience has changed you? Because in the time I've known you and the more I've learnt about you, a very independent woman, you've done a lot of travelling, you work in a high-powered corporate career, and you've gone down this road very proudly, and now you're working to help other women and are on a mission to spread the word about what support there is, how you don't have to be stuck in a rut, helping people change their mindsets from the corporate point of view, even to the kind of healthcare associations that people are making, calling women solo mothers rather than single mothers, all these types of things that you've experienced and you're thinking, and it's really admirable what you're doing, and I'm really interested in how you feel this has changed you.
I think probably similar to what any mum would think. I think my priorities have changed. So having a daughter puts other things into perspective. So I think definitely, you know, not thinking work things are sort of the be all and end all is one thing. I think just been astonished by people and how supportive people are, and how accepting people are of different scenarios. And I was surprised. I thought there'd be a lot more, you know, I didn't think people would be as open. And so I've loved having the conversations and changing people's mindsets, and just those conversations I can have with and helping so many people. And I think I was already a planned and organised person, but it is just this has taken it to the absolute extremes. But what I really, really believe, and this is the message that I just love to share with as many people as I can, is everything is possible. So if you want something, it might not look exactly how you thought it might be. It might not follow the exact path, but there is a way to make things work. If you speak to the right people, get the right help, you can always make what you need to happen, as long as you're not set on it looking exactly like this. You know, you need to go on a journey, and I'm just really passionate, and I've seen so many examples where I really feel like I'm living proof of having it all. I just think, you know, some of it is luck, some of it is how I've managed to make it happen. But I think it's really important that people know that, and we can put things in place to get there.
Well, with that thought, so you're talking to lots of different women in different scenarios at different stages of the thought process. They're either adamant they're going to do it, or they're just looking into how they do it. And obviously cost is a factor if you're going to have to pay for treatment, because there isn't really much eligibility, is there, with solo mums to have access to funding for fertility treatment, or is there? So
no, my understanding is that you know, this has to be funded privately because you haven't got fertility problems. Your fertility problem is that there is no sperm. You've not got access to the sperm. My understanding is that there is a route if you try yourself down the IUI route and are unsuccessful a certain number of times, that you may then get some access to funding. I think it depends what country you're in and what part of the UK you're in, if you're in the UK. But no, primarily it needs to be funded yourself. And what I speak to women about is the different options that they have. There's you know, different clinics. Do they want to go abroad? What treatment? What package? Have you got a known donor? Do you have to pay for a donor? There's so many different options. It's quite overwhelming for people when they're first starting the journey to try to understand all those options. But there's lots of information available and lots of people to talk to who've already done it. So people are getting more and more informed about what options they've got now.
And just finally, because we've talked about what you've just described in this series with regards to the options from the donor point of view. We've talked about the kind of support element. I'm interested in the telling to Daisy of her story, how you feel about that, whether it's already a part of what you talk about. Obviously, she's so little, but whether it's something that you're fearful of, how you're putting those factors in place for when it is the right time and the people that are around her, what that story is and how it's going to pan out.
So it actually, for me, I'm not fearful of it. What I am doing is I'm doing a lot of research on it. So I'm speaking to people who've already had the conversations, speaking to donor conceived adults about how they found the process. I've been on webinars, I've read books. So I'm really educating myself on the best way to do it. I feel like I've already started. So whilst Daisy's young, it's around who's her family. We've got a soft book that says, this is mummy, this is granny, this is Uncle Dan, like this is your family. That will move on to trying to explain diversity to a very small person, but I think that's super easy to do. You know, you can talk about all the different makeups of families. Again, I think it comes down to mindset. This is nothing to be ashamed of. I'm very proud of this, and that will also come across to Daisy, so she'll never think it's anything that's a problem because of the way I'll talk to her about it. But I'm very realistic that becomes more challenging when you start going to school and other people start asking, and that's when I will need to equip Daisy with her own way of sharing her story, and we will just have honest and open conversations to make sure she feels equipped with the information so she can share her story. And I think now people are in so many different situations. There is no normal, and everyone, you know, has got their own situations, and you know, I hope that Daisy will be confident to be able to share that with her friends and it won't be an issue at all.
I wonder if at the school gates it's more unusual that there's just the dad than just the mum. You know, whether the dad would be more likely to, or the child with just the dad would be asked more questions.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think it depends what your normal is as well. So depending on your circumstances, you know, you may very well think it's unusual for people to have a mum and a dad if that's not what you've grown up with. So yeah, I think, you know, in the years to come, there'll be so many different scenarios.
Yeah.
I hope, and I think children will just accept all the different scenarios that they're presented with.
Well, I think it's testament to the fact that telling is definitely better than not telling. Exactly. However you choose to tell and what you choose to tell is part of what you've got to work out, but just to not tell is not really the solution.
Everything I have learned from all the research is don't surprise people. And if they've known something all throughout their lives, they are easily able to deal with it. If they get a shock and suddenly learn something later on, that's where problems start occurring. That's all of the research that I've read very, very clearly tells you, just be honest. And how you tell them, I went on a very interesting webinar which says you can sort of go down more of a fairy tale route or you can go more of a factual route, and that depends on you and your child and what works best for you. And the thing that I've learned is every child is different, so you've got to do what you think the child will respond best to, and you've got to remember it's their story, not your story. So I've had my story, that's how we got here, but now this is Daisy's story and she needs to help me define, you know, how she wants to tell that as well as she gets older.
It's a lovely approach. It's a really lovely kind of combined, as it should be, combined, shared way forward.
Exactly,
so, thank you. It's really lovely chatting to you again.
So all the details for Becky and for Mel will be in the show notes for this episode, which are thefertilitypodcast.com/defining motherhood. Now, Becky had referred to her Insta Live series with Jana Rupno starting tomorrow, the 19th of March, if you're listening in real time. It's actually happening on Wednesday. Becky had let me know. So again, check out her Insta for details of that. Mel's details will be on these show notes as well as a link to the fertility show where I'm going to be this coming Saturday and Sunday in Manchester. So once you've checked out the show notes, and had a look around any previous episodes, and maybe give me a little rate and review if you're listening in Apple Podcasts. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Oh, where's that aeroplane going? Wouldn't you love to be on an aeroplane right now? So yeah, be sure to subscribe. Thank you as always for your support. And until the next time.